Vishnu, shall we wait for 1 or 2 minutes? Only 80 participants are there. Vishnu, can you hear me? Hello? Yes. Whether Vishnu is not here?
Sir, വിഷ്ണുവിന്റെ മൈക്ക് ഇഷ്യൂ ആണ് സർ ഓപ്പൺ ആക്കാൻ പറ്റുന്നില്ല.
Okay. 2 minutes കൂടെ വെയിറ്റ് ചെയ്യണോ? We can wait for 2 minutes. Okay, fine. I'll wait. Okay. Okay, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
So, I forgot to have an exam. Okay, otherwise, I used to do is when there is offline class, I used to ask questions before the beginning of each class from the previous class. So during this online session, what I used to have is I used to prepare a small Google form as a quiz and I will circulate in the class so that within 5 minutes you can submit it. Okay, next class onwards, I forgot it this time. Next class onwards, I will keep it. It's not for your grading and all, it's just to refresh what you have learned in the last class. Okay. So, in the last class, we have discussed about insects, how an insect looks like. We'll more look into it in more detail today, and what is the relationship between other arthropods we have seen, other classes, and what are the uses of insects, whether how they are beneficial to us, how they are harmful to us. So all those things we discussed in the last class. In today's class, we will be discussing. I will have two sessions because I have missed one class in between. Not one, two classes in between. So I will be taking the two entire sessions. These are two theoretical sessions. I will give a break of 5 or 10 minutes in between. Don't worry. So first we will see why the insects have become this much dominant in the universe. We have seen about 70 or 80% of the total organisms is insects. And the last class we have studied how insects, and this insects has evolved very long back, about 350 million years back. 350 million means 3,500 lakh years before. So how, why those certain organisms which have evolved along with insects, it's not there in the world now. Almost all of them became extinct. But insects are still going strong. Evolutionary, it is one of the highly successful organism, and it is dominating the entire universe with the sheer numbers, sheer diversity. And what makes them so dominant and so successful in this universe? What are the features that makes the insect more successful? That's what we discussed in the first part. Then we will see a bit about general organization of insect. That is a part of the practical also. That's a very small thing that you can draw it in your records also. In the second class, we will go into the morphology. Voice break ആവുന്നുണ്ടോ? What's the for this? Is it breaking?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay. Let's check. There was a message. That's why. Okay. Then in the second class, I will be discussing about the insect integument. Integument is the outer body wall of the insect. We'll start the morphology part from the outer body. So that's what we will be discussing today. So first I will share it. Just a minute. Hope it's visible to you. Yes. Okay. Fine. So first we will be discussing about the dominance. And as I told, it is one of the most abundant organism in the world, and it's evolved around 350 million years ago. So that means it is having an extremely long, successful run in the universe. And what contributed to its success and what contributed to its dominance? And it occupies very diverse habitat compared to other organisms. Say, take human beings. We are mainly terrestrial. Take the case of insects. It can be terrestrial. There are certain species, large number of species which are aquatic, and there are large number of species which are subterranean. Can anyone give the name of a subterranean insect? Subterranean means insects which reside in soil. Just give an example of a subterranean insect. Just type it in the chat box. Termite, yes, good. That's the excellent example. Then, can you give Kuriana? Yes, Kuriana, mole cricket, yes, good. Ants, yes. Kuriana, how many of you got? Earthworms are not insects. Earthworms are annelids. Subterranean. But കുഴിയാൻ ആരെങ്കിലും കുഴിയാനെ പിടിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടോ? No? Yes, one. That's an excellent predator. That's an excellent predator. Okay. The others are also predaceous. Certain. Okay. You will study it about Hasina madam will teach you about it. And can you give a few names of aquatic insects? Have you ever seen an aquatic insect? Lepisma is not purely an aquatic. So it can be stonefly, yes. Stonefly, water beetles, yes. Water beetles, yes. There are water beetles, water striders, yes. Water strider actually, it's water strider. Then water treaders. I don't know, at least Vellatil Pata, yes. Those who are living in the rural areas, you can go to any neighboring water body, the flowing river water, yes, mayflies is good. And you can see certain insects moving over the water surface, just skating over the water surface with some long legs and all. It moves over the water surface. മലയാളത്തിലെ പല സ്ഥലത്തും പല പേരാണ് പറയാ, വെള്ളത്തിലാശാൻ, എഴുത്തച്ഛൻ എന്നൊക്കെ പറയും. So this, yes, എഴുത്തച്ഛൻ, yes. For rural, in rural areas, it's very common, especially in freshwater. So those kind of insects, there are so many aquatic insects. We'll see one by one. Then there are insects which occupy deserts. Can you name an insect which became extremely popular last year, which occupy mainly desert areas? And sometimes it migrates in huge numbers to urban areas. Or yes, locusts, yes, good. So it occupies, there are certain insects which reside in extreme hot weather of deserts, and some insects which reside in frozen polar, yes, vertically, yes, good. So why these insects have become more successful, that's what we will discuss now. So one major reasons for its success is the presence of wings. In the last class I told you, how many wings are there in an insect? Two pairs, yes, there are two pairs of wings. And with these two pairs of wings, it has the ability to fly. And with this ability of flight, it can fly over to various places in search of food. If there is some shortage of food, see locusts. It migrates from one continent to another. Last year when we had a locust swarm, I don't know whether you have read it in newspapers. Its migration, its history, if we trace back, it starts from Africa, move over to the Gulf region, then comes to Iran, over to Iran, Afghanistan, over to Pakistan, and then to India. So this intercontinental from Africa to Asia. Then have you ever read about an insect called as monarch butterfly? Yes. I will just describe. If someone has not read about it, just type it in Google and search about monarch butterfly. Migration of monarch butterfly. It's extremely unique in nature. This monarch butterfly is usually seen in the northern part of US and in Canada. Northern part of United States and neighboring Canada. And with the time of winter, there is harsh winter in northern, yes, group migration, northern part of US and near Canada. It's extremely harsh winter. That means the temperature goes below 0 degrees Celsius. So with the onset of winter, all the monarch butterfly from the northern parts of United States cross over the entire United States. I don't know whether you have seen last year, I don't know how many of you have followed the American election. Trump versus Biden election. In that, you might have seen this US map. It is somewhat looking like this, almost shaped. It's not exactly. I consider this as the northern area. This is a northern and this is a southern area. And here you will have the Canada. So from this area, northern area, from Canada and northern United States, it migrates. Here in the southern part, we have Mexico. Mexico is tropical, almost similar to our culture, our climate. So this monarch butterfly migrates from this northern area, cross over the entire width of United States and reaches Mexico for the warmer weather in winter. It survives in Mexico, reproduces, and the next generation flies back from Mexico to Northern America when by the arrival of the spring. So this migration is taking place every year. So that's why insects are becoming more successful. So this is just like this example I told you, locust, monarch butterfly, it has the capacity of flight. It helps it to find food, mate. That means the males or female insects fly over long distance to locate its mate and reproduce. And the flight, as usual, it helps it to escape from the enemies. So the wings helps it to locate food in a larger area, wider area, helps to locate the mate and to escape from enemies. Just as in the case of monarch butterflies, I told, it can migrate from unfavorable areas to favorable area. If some area becomes unfavorable, the weather, climate, something becomes unfavorable, it moves over to favorable area. Wings helps it to do so in quick time. Then we have an exoskeleton in the insect that I told you. Human beings have a endoskeleton because our skeletal system is inside. But insects, we have a exoskeleton. The whole body integument, that means the body cover, is transformed into a very hard structure and it is called as the exoskeleton. And the muscles are attached to this exoskeleton, this hardened structure. Just I request you to imagine a rhinoceros beetle, that dark colored, very hard beetle. I will show just a beetle. This is not a rhinoceros beetle. I don't know whether you can see it or not. See, this is extremely hard. This is the skin and this is the exoskeleton. This exoskeleton, this hardened exoskeleton helps in the attachment of muscles. Just like for us, our muscular system, humans, our muscles are attached to the skeleton, endoskeleton. Just like that, in insects, the muscles are attached to the exoskeleton, but here the skeleton is outside, not inside. So the insect possesses a hardened body wall. The body wall, the integument is extremely hardened. We will discuss about it in the next class. And it is called as integument. And this hard structure, as you know, the insect rhinoceros beetle, as in the case of the rhinoceros, the body cover is extremely hard. It protects the insects because of the hardness of that integument, and it provides attachment to the muscles. I told you, it gives rigidity. That means it's strong, extremely strong in nature. And another thing with respect to the exoskeleton is that the insects has to conserve a lot of water because say, take the case of locusts. They live in desert. There is no water source and they are in millions of numbers. So that means they have to conserve moisture at a temperature say about 50 degrees Celsius. Otherwise, just like human beings, if it is desert at that temperature without water, human beings will die within a few days. But insects survive for long periods. How? This insect integument or the exocuticle at this hardened part contains a layer called a wax layer. That means, just imagine that we will discuss about it later today itself. This integument has a coating of wax over it. So what we just imagine if you have a waxy coating over it. It prevents this waxy coating, prevents the evaporation of moisture from the insect body. The integument has a waxy coating, and this waxy coating prevents the escape of moisture from the insect body, and it helps in the conservation of water, and it helps us in the survival of insects. Are you clear up to this? Yes. Okay. Then it's smaller in size, very small. You might have seen. Just imagine an ant, very small in size. So how the smaller size enables the insects to survive. Just imagine, take the case of an ant itself. Even if you keep some sweet, say sugar, inside a bottle, if there is a very slight gap in the cap of the bottle, ants will enter into that sugar bottle. So this smaller size enables it to occupy very small spaces. It helps in to have very little requirement of food. Smaller size means food requirement is low. So it can survive very less quantity of food. It needs only very less space, and it can occupy very small habitat. You might have seen somebody was telling about lepisma. Lepisma and all lives inside the book bindings and all. So it can occupy in very small areas, and it helps in hiding from the natural enemies. I don't know, as kids, you might all have played police and thief. Kallanim police and കളിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടോ? So the smaller kids among the lot which we are playing has the ability to hide in very extreme places. Last week, when I was at my home, my native place, my brother's kids and my kids were playing together, and the smallest one was hiding in all the cupboards and all, very small places. So that is the ability, that is the advantage of having a very small size. It can help to get rid of natural enemies. So smaller size, very less requirement of food, the space requirement is less, and it helps in to avoid natural enemies, and it is very high reproductive. Though it is very small size, its reproductive potential is very high. I have given it just a very meager number. I have just given it as a every female has the ability to produce 100 to 300 eggs, but it's not so. Many number of insects has the ability to produce about 1,000 to 3,000 eggs per female. That is the fecundity or reproductive ability of insects. On an average, we can say that it's about 100 to 300. So that's the capacity of the insects to multiply. So the wings helps it to locate food. Its mate helps it to escape from natural enemies and to move to favorable areas. The exoskeleton protects the insect. It gives rigidity. It prevents desiccation. It helps with attachment of muscles. And the smaller size, less food, less space. Natural enemies fails to notice it, and it has very high reproductive potential. Not only here, there are several other factors out there. It has extremely short life. Human beings completed the average life cycle of a lifespan of a Kerala. Today there was a report in newspaper that our lifespan, the Kerala people lifespan is somewhere between 70 and 75 years. That means each generation takes 70 or 75 years to complete. But in the case of insects, most of the insects can complete its life cycle in 1 month, less than a month. There are certain insects which has the ability to complete its life cycle within a few weeks, few days. Fruit flies and all, within a few weeks, few days, it completes its life cycle. So that means if an insect completes its life cycle in few days or a month, in a year, that insect can have about 12 generation. If the life cycle is 30 days, in an year, it will have 12 generation. That means each generation a single female. I will take a typical example. Say an insect with an ability to produce 100 eggs per female. There was a single female on January 1. On January 1, that single female laid 100 eggs. And that 100 eggs, imagine that male female ratio is 1:1. That means of the 100 eggs, 50 will be male and 50 will be female. So what will be the number of insects in February, in the next month? A female laid 100 eggs in January. Imagine about male female ratio is 1:1. That means 50, there are 50 females. In February, how many insects will be there in February? Very simple calculation. No one? 5,000. Yes, it's 5,000. So in February, imagine there's among this 5,000, half is again female, 1:1 ratio. That means 2,500. 2,500 females are there. Again, each female lays about 100 eggs. So what will be the number in March? 2,50,000. So here you can see the number increases exponentially. So it can multiply in huge numbers very quick time. So that is the advantage. But don't think that all the insects are having very short life cycle. I was telling about the example of rhinoceros beetle. Rhinoceros beetle, for completion of life cycle, it's take about 8 to 9 years. But most of the time, this insects, most of the large proportion of insects are very short lifespan. And there are certain insects who completes their life cycle in 17 years. Have you ever heard about that kind of an insect? Just a minute. Have you ever heard of an insect which completes life cycle in 17 years? No. Have you heard about cicadas? Cicada. Yes. മലയാളത്തിൽ എന്താടാ പറയുന്നത് സിക്കാടയ്ക്ക്? I don't know what's its name in other languages, sorry. ചീവീട് എന്ന് പറയുന്ന സാധനമാണ്. നമ്മൾ സാധാരണ പറയുന്ന ചീവീടല്ല, ഒരു ബഗ്ഗാണ് സിക്കാഡ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. There are certain cicadas in കാട്ടിലൊക്കെ ചെല്ലുമ്പോൾ when you enter into a forest, there you can see a very sharp shrill sound. We call it, നമ്മൾ എപ്പോഴും പറയുന്നത് ചീവീടിന്റെ ഒച്ചയാണ്. That is because of cicadas. These insects called as cicadas. These cicadas have a certain kind of cicadas which has a lifespan of 17 years. Okay, so but a major proportion is having very short life cycle. And next advantage is having a metamorphosis. That means it changes its form, its morphology with the change during its life cycle. First it will be egg, then the egg hatches out into a larvae. The larvae then pupates, entirely different. The larvae and pupae are entirely different, and then from the pupae it will emerge into a very beautiful butterfly, entirely different. So how metamorphosis is helping the insect in its dominance or survival. See, take the case of the feeding strategy of larvae and the adult. Take the example of a butterfly itself. The larvae will feed on the leaves, but what the butterflies feed? What does a butterfly feed? Nectar. Yes. So there is no competition between, even though they can reproduce in huge numbers, they don't compete among themselves, the young ones and the adults, just like animals, say human beings. The young ones and adults need the same kind of nutrition, same kind of food. So, but insects, even though they are in huge numbers, the adults as well as the young ones feed on diverse kind of food resources. Larvae will be feeding on plants, butterflies will be feeding on nectar. So this will avoid the competition between the same group of insects. So metamorphosis helps in that manner. Then comes quicker speciation. That means they can, few new species can evolve very fast because very short life cycle. A small change, mutations can happen and it can be carried over to further generations within a short time. So this shorter life cycle helps in quicker speciation. That means more number of species within a short time. So that is one advantage of insect. Then there are certain other advantage such as hexapod locomotion. That means there are six legs, as I know, hexa means six, pod means leg, hexapod locomotion. So imagine these three are the legs of an insect. You can see I just seen the three plus three legs on either sides. Uh, Three pairs of legs. So it's not that insect utilizes all the six legs at a time while moving. It's not so. At a time, it will be utilizing only three legs, just like this. See, two from one side and one leg from the other side. And in the next second, it will be like this. See, two from the other side and one from the other side. So that means almost all the time, walking at a time, it utilizes only three legs, two from one side and one from the other side, just like a tripod. You might have seen a tripod for camera stands and all, just like a tripod. So this tripod is one of the stable structure. You might have seen the camera people, videographers, photographers always use a tripod. Why don't they use a stand with four legs? Why they are using a tripod? Because with the smallest number of legs, it is the most stable structure. So this tripod kind of locomotion helps in mobility because they can change it, because only three pairs of leg. You might have seen this camera people carrying these tripods easily. If it was four legs, it won't be that easy. So it will help in more speed with more stability, and at any point of time only three legs will be touching the ground, and it has very good sensory powers. It has eyes, it has the power to sense chemicals, smell, very good smell. It has auditory powers, it can hear, it can produce sound and it can hear. It has an antenna. That means from the head, it has an antenna. This antenna is also sensory. It can sense chemicals. It can sense the flight also, speed of flight, speed of wind, everything it can measure with the help of antenna. So these sensory structures all around the insect body helps them to have a sense of the environment, what is happening outside. So insects have very well developed sensory powers. And next is it has a decentralized nervous system. That means, take the case of humans. Where is our nervous system concentrated? Brain. So insects have a central nervous system. Each segment, I told you, insects are segmented organisms. Each segment has a group of nerve cells. We call it as neurons, nerve cells. Just imagine each segment is having a group of nerve cells, and that group of nerve cells, everything Manisa will teach you, ganglion and all. So, but if just think that each segment has its own group of nerve cells. That means the nervous system is decentralized. That means even if something happens to the central nervous system or the brain, insects can survive because its nervous system is decentralized. Each segment has its own group of nerve cells. That is the advantage. Next is direct respiration. We will compare the respiration in human beings and insects. We have two nostrils. We take in air. Our air reaches into the lungs. In the lungs, the blood, with the help of the blood, takes out the oxygen, and carbon dioxide will be released into the lungs. Carbon dioxide will be exhaled, and the oxygen laden blood, hemoglobin, will be transported all along our body. But in the case of insects, it's not so. Every segment will have a respiratory opening. The respiratory openings are present in every portion. Just imagine that we have a respiratory opening over here in the arm region, in the thoracic, in the chest region, in the abdomen region, in the leg. So what is the advantage of that? There is a quick and direct transfer of oxygen to different parts of the body. In human beings, it is indirect. Oxygen is taken up, air is taken up into the lungs, and we take the help of blood or hemoglobin to transfer the oxygen to different parts of the body. Here it's not so. Each segment has a respiratory opening, so the oxygen exchange happens quickly. This is a general scenario, but as insects evolve, the number of respiratory openings and all has decreased in certain animals. But generally, insects have, all segment has its own respiratory. I will show you a picture later. Okay. Then another adaptation is diverse mechanisms of reproduction. It can reproduce sexually, as in any other organism. It can reproduce asexually, just like bacteria and all. It can't reproduce by cell division and all, but it can reproduce by parthenogenesis. What is parthenogenesis? What is parthenogenesis? Without fertilization, yes. Even if the insect doesn't find a mate, a male, the female can reproduce. Not all insects. There are certain insects. Imagine. Then what is pedogenesis? Pedogenesis is nothing but young ones has the ability to reproduce. And not only adults, young ones has the ability to reproduce in certain insects. So insects can reproduce by sexually, asexually, by parthenogenetically, pedogenesis, so diverse mechanisms of reproduction. And it has several protective adaptation. I will just give, have you seen an adaptive coloration or something of an insect? Can you give an example which has the camouflaging power, which can escape from natural enemies by attaining the shape of the environment and all? Chameleon, yes. Leaf bug, it is called as leaf insect. Leaf insect, yes. So that is chameleon, that is an organism. Insects, it is stick insects. Chameleon is all having this adaptiveness, adaptive coloration, stick insects. Then it is mimicry. I will show a picture. Mimicry means just like a person who is not a Mammootty or Mohanlal but an act like a Mammootty or Mohanlal. So insects, there are certain insects which are extremely edible to natural enemies. That means birds and all these natural enemies may feed on this insect because that is extremely preferred one. But what the insect will do, it will take the it will mimic an insect which is not at all favorable, not at all palatable. I will give a few examples. Give a few examples of will be easy to understand. And certain insects have spines. You might have seen hairy caterpillars. ചൊറിയും പുഴുവിനെ കണ്ടിട്ടില്ലേ? Larvae with so many hairs. If you catch that larvae, it will be causing itching. And there are venoms. There are insects which has the ability to produce venom. Can you name an insect which has the ability to produce venoms and toxin? A quick example. Wasp, yes, wasp, honeybee. Monarch butterfly is a typical example of mimicry. Uh, yes, scorpion. Scorpion is an arthropod, not an insect. Then repellent chemicals. Certain insects has the ability to produce repellent. I don't know whether you have experience. Yes, acid fly. That is the one. I was about to tell that. Good. Say certain insects, if it comes on touches your skin, it will produce yes, iceberg. Yes, good. All this produce repellent chemicals. Then to overcome unfavorable conditions, it has diapos and quiescence. I think you might have studied about diapos and quiescence. That means if temperature becomes unfavorable, if there is not enough water, insects can go into a diapos or a hibernation. And once the condition becomes favorable, it becomes active again. So this diapos and quiescence is present in insects. There is a difference between diapos and quiescence. I am not going into that. And certain highly evolved insects such as bees, ants, termites, etc., they have a social life. Have you ever heard about the caste system in insects, especially in honeybees? I think you might have studied it. Biology. What are all the caste? Yes. So there is a social organization. Just like human beings, there will be a head of the organization. There will be certain persons who will be doing, just like our college. Our dean will be there, professors will be there, clerical staffs, ASQ, drones, etc. Then for in the uh, farms, we had workers, farm laborers. So in that, there is a division of labor. So this kind of social activity, social organization is present in. So I think now you have a picture why insects has become more successful in this universe. I will quickly glance through all this again. I won't be explaining it again. What are the reason? One, it is wings. Then second, it is exoskeleton. Then it's in the smaller size, the high reproductive potential, short life cycle, metamorphosis, quicker speciation, several adaptations such as hexapod locomotion, sensory structures, perceptive sensory structures, decentralized nervous system, direct respiration, diverse mechanisms of reproduction, protective adaptations, social life, etc. So all this contributes to the successful dominance of insects in this universe. See, you can see in this picture, just a minute. See, this is a leaf insect. It resembles that of a leaf. Here again, it resembles a dry leaf. Here, you can look into it. This is a mimicry. Can you differentiate between snake and a moth? Actually, it is a moth, but many a times an insect approaching it for feeding it will confuse it with an insect. Confuse it with a snake, and the insect will escape from the natural enemies. And take this, these two butterflies. If you just look into these two pictures, you will think that both are the same butterflies. No. One is a monarch butterfly. Yeah, I told you about monarch butterfly. The other one is called as viceroy butterfly. Viceroy butterfly. Viceroy butterfly. This monarch butterfly is not at all palatable. That means it feeds on a plant called Scalotropis. Plant. So this monarch butterfly has the ability to feed on the Scalotropis plant. The Scalotropis has some chemicals which is not at all favored by predators. But viceroy butterflies is an extremely palatable insect. It is extremely tasty to predators. So what viceroy butterfly will do? It will mimic monarch butterfly, which is an unpalatable one. So whatever predators will think that this is a monarch butterfly and viceroy butterfly will escape predation. Can you locate an insect in this left side picture? Yes. This is called as peppered moth. Peppered moth. Peppered moth. So then take this. Here you can see a stick insect. The stick insect, again it is mimicking. See, this is a moth. If you see the moth, the wing, again it is mimicking the snake. Escape from the predators. Leaf insect. All these things, very stark coloration. The body is completely covered with hairs and all. Helps in protective adaptation. So within 5 minutes, I will just give a brief introduction of insect body, and we'll take a break for 5 minutes and then we will reassemble. Okay. We'll just go through glance into the organization of body, insect body. The insect body is divided into three parts. These three parts, that division is called as tagmosis, and each part is called as tagmata. Remember, insect body is divided into three parts, and this division of insect body into three parts is called as tagmosis, and each part is called as tagmata. Tagmata. So insect body is divided into three parts or three tagmata, and these three parts are head, thorax and abdomen. So insect body is divided into three parts, and these three parts are head, thorax and abdomen. That, or we can say that insect has three tagmata, and these three tagmata are head, thorax and abdomen. And this process of dividing insect body into three tagmata of head, thorax and abdomen is called as tagmosis. Clear? From now onwards, you will be hearing a lot of terminologies. So try to be attentive. Okay. Then each part, head, thorax and abdomen, is divided into number of segments. In the first class we discussed that insects are segmented organisms. So head is consisting of number of segments, thorax is consisting of number of segments and abdomen is consisting of number of segments. I have given the list. Head is normally consisting of 6 segments. But one problem with an insect head is all the segments are fused together. So we cannot distinguish the segments in an insect head. Though there are 6 segments, scientists have identified that there are 6 segments, but it is very difficult to separate out these 6 segments in the insect head. We will discuss how we can differentiate when we discuss about insect head in the next class, next week. And the thorax is divided into 3 segments. Thorax is having 3 segments and the abdomen is having 11 segments. Abdomen is having 11 segments. So what is the total number of segments in an insect? If someone asks you what is the total number of segments in it, 20. Yes, good. And the head is connected to thorax by a flexible area called as cervix or neck. Just like we have a neck over here, which connects our head to the whole thoracic region. Insect also, here also our neck is flexible. Just a minute. Just like our head is flexible, the insect has a part between head and thorax which is flexible, and it is called as neck or cervix. You might have seen, have you seen that famous Telugu movie which was dubbed in other languages, which is the hero is an insect? Can you name it? Icha, yes. Icha. It was Makki, I think it was Makki in Hindi, Eager in Telugu. I don't know the names in other languages. So, in that you might have seen that insect is moving its head. That movement is because of the flexible region between the head and the thorax. That is called as cervix. And each segment in the next class, after 5 minutes we will go into the next class. In that class I will tell that it's not the insect body wall is hardened, as I in the exoskeleton part just before, about 15-20 minutes before, I told insect body wall is extremely hardened, but it's not hardened throughout its entire length from tip to the end. There are certain areas between the segments, there are certain areas which are flexible, which is not hardened. That is in between the segments. That area between the segments which is flexible is called as switches. And these switches, we also call them as intersegmental lines, lines between two segments. Remember, insects are segmented organism. Between each segment, we have a line of flexibility, and where the exoskeleton is not hardened, and that line of flexibility is called as sutures. But in insects, there are certain lines which just helps to have some invaginations of the cuticle. Have you ever seen sheets which we are using it for roofing? Yes or no? Have you seen the roofing sheets? Yes. Why we are giving ridges and furrows to that roofing sheet? Why can't we use a plain metallic sheet for roofing? Why we are giving that? It will be corrugated metal sheet. That means there will be ridges and furrows. Strength, yes. So similar to that, in order to strengthen the exocuticle, there will be invagination, which is not present along the intersegmental between the two segments. Can happen anywhere in between segments also. Those invagination which is not present in between two segments, just to give strength to the integument, is called as sulci. Sulci is the plural. Sulcus is the uh, singular. Sulcus. Sulcus. Okay. So insect body segmented, in between each segment it is flexible lines called as sutures, but there can be certain inflections or invaginations just like furrows and all, in order to strengthen the insect body wall, and they are called sulcus or sulci, that is the plural. Up to this, are you clear? Any doubt? Yes. So this is just a picture of it. See, general, this you can draw in your practical record. This is the head, this is the thorax, this green area, and this pink or red area is the abdomen. And you can see head, I told you, though it is consists of segments, we can't differentiate the segments over here, but the head consists of a compound eye, and compound eye, we have two compound eye. You imagine that Icha movie, two eyes at over here. So a pair of compound eyes, and it has three numbers of simple eyes or ocelli. That I will tell in the next slide. That will be in a triangular fashion here. Two will be here and another one will be here. You just look into my video also, two will be here and another one will be here. So they have three ocelli, or sometimes it is called a simple eyes, and it has a pair of antenna, and it will have a mouth part through which the food will be ingested. So that is with respect to head. Compound eyes, ocelli, antenna, and mouth parts. Thorax, I told you, it has three segments. Each segment will be having a pair of leg. You can see. You are seeing from the side, that's why you are seeing only one leg. But on the other side, we have the other three legs. So each segment, we have one pair of legs each, and in the second and third segment, thoracic segment, we have a pair of wings. The front pair of wing, we call it as forewing. Second pair of wing, we call it as the hind wing. So thorax, we call it as the locomotory area because this is where the locomotory appendages are attached, legs as well as wings. So all the segments carry a pair of legs, and the second and third abdominal segment carry a pair of wings. And this is the abdomen. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 segments. And this is the abdomen carries the reproductive system. And you can see small round structures over here. All this here, the name is written spiracle. That will be taken by Manisha. Just think that these are our, just like our nostrils. Each segments, I told you earlier, each segment has a respiratory opening. Whatever you see it over here are the respiratory openings called as spiracles. Okay, this is the general plan. This is again the same. You can see the segments. You can see here abdomen, it has segments, and between these two segments here it will be flexible. That's why this is the egg laying, but this is the locust. This is the egg laying by the locust. What picture that you see is the beginning of the egg laying by locust. Locust lays eggs into the soil. So in order to lay the eggs, the abdomen, it has to be flexible. So that flexibility is provided by the sutures present over. This is the suture. You can see a separation between the two segments. That is the suture. This is again dragonfly. Here you can see the head. This is the thorax, and see here it will be flexible. That is the neck or cervix. The abdominal segments, between the two segments, here we'll have the suture, a flexible area. Butterflies. This thing we have seen. The head consists of antenna, one pair, compound eyes, one pair, ocelli, three in number, mouth parts. Thorax consists of three pairs of legs on each segment, wings only on this second and third segment, a pair each. Abdomen consists of reproductive structures, and few terminology you have to remember. Can you see my video? Can you see I am holding an insect? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. The top part of the insect, if you see it from the top of the insect, that top part we call it as the dorsal area. The upper part or the top part we call it as the dorsal, call as the tergum, dorsal area or the tergum. and the bottom area, just a minute, the bottom area or the lower area or the ventral area, we call it as the ventral area, is called as the sternum. So the upper part is the upper part is the tergum. From top it is the tergum. The lower part is the sternum, and the sides, these two sides, we call it as the pleuron. The lateral part we call it as the pleuron. So dorsally we have, or the upper part we call it as the tergum, ventral part we call it as the sternum, and the lateral part we call it as the pleuron. So this is how an insect looks like. From the top, upper part, this is the tergum. Lower part, the base, the undersurface, we call it as the sternum, that is the ventral part. And the sides, two sides, we call it as the pleuron. This area, this side, we call it as the pleuron. Another terminology, we call it as anterior, posterior. The head area, that directed forward, we call it as the anterior area. The area that is directed backward, the tip of the abdomen, we call it as the posterior area. And we have, sometimes we use the term proximal and distal, etc. That is mainly with respect to appendages, legs, wings, etc. The part of the appendage, leg or wing, which is close to the body is called as the proximal area or the basal area. The part of the appendage, leg or wing, which is away from the insect body is called as the distal region or the apical region. I am repeating. The part which is directing towards the tip, head end, we call it as the anterior end. Towards the abdomen, that is the posterior end. The part of an appendage, say leg or wing, which is close to the body is called as the proximal or basal area. And the part of the wing or leg which is away from the insect body is called as the distal or apical part. Are you clear? Yes. One thing, I'm stopping it for 4 or 5 minutes. You can take a rest, you can take some water and all. Take this as an informal session. If you have any doubts, you can clarify. If you need any further explanations for any portion, any term which I told, you can ask it now. I'll be available. Don't consider it as a formal session. Consider it as an informal session. Whatever doubt that comes to your mind, you can ask. No doubts, no clarifications needed. ഇപ്പൊ സാധാരണ ഒരു ഓഫ്ലൈൻ ക്ലാസ് ഒക്കെ ആയിരുന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരു മിനിറ്റ് ബ്രേക്കുന്നോ 2 മിനിറ്റ് ബ്രേക്ക് ക്ലാസ് ഇങ്ങനെ കലവിലായിരുന്നു. ഇപ്പൊ അതും ഒരു ഭയങ്കര സൈലൻസ് ആണ്. ആ ഉറക്കെ പറയടോ.
വിത്ത് കൊടുക്കുന്ന ഒരു പരിപാടി ഇല്ലായിരുന്നു NSSന്റെ.
ആ അത് വിത്ത് എന്റെ കയ്യിൽ സ്റ്റോക്ക് ഇരിക്കടോ. ആ വിത്തൊക്കെ മേടിച്ചു വെച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. നിങ്ങൾ വരും എന്ന് വിചാരിച്ചാണ് ഞാൻ. അന്നത്തെ പ്രതീക്ഷ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് നിങ്ങളൊരു മെയ്യോടുകൂടി ഇവിടെ നിങ്ങൾ വരും, തിയറി കഴിഞ്ഞ് പ്രാക്ടിക്കൽ പാർട്ടിനായിട്ട് എന്ന് വിചാരിച്ചു. അപ്പൊ പിന്നെ വീട്ടിൽ പോകുമ്പോഴത്തേക്കും കൊടുത്തു വിടാമെന്നാണ്. ആ വിത്ത് മുഴുവൻ എന്റെ കയ്യിൽ ഇരിക്കുക. ആരുടെ ഒരാളുടെ ഇവിടെ അടുത്തുള്ള തൃശ്ശൂരുള്ള ഒരാൾ വന്നപ്പോ ഞാൻ ആ വിത്ത് കൊടുത്തു വിടുക. അവര് പറഞ്ഞ അത്രയും വിത്ത് ഞാൻ കൊടുത്തു വിട്ടു. നിങ്ങൾ എന്ന്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇവിടെ അടുത്തുള്ളവരാണ് ആരെങ്കിലും ആണെങ്കിൽ വന്നാൽ തരാം, ഇവിടെ ഉണ്ട്. ഞങ്ങള് എപ്പോ അങ്ങോട്ട് വിളിക്കും? ഹോപ്പ്ഫുള്ളി ഒക്ടോബർ. ഇപ്പൊ ഗവൺമെന്റ് ഡിസിഷൻ ഒക്ടോബർ എന്നാണ്. അത് ഫൈനൽ ഇയേഴ്സിനാണ്. നിങ്ങൾക്ക് എങ്ങനെ എന്നുള്ളത് നവംബറിലേക്ക് ഓൾമോസ്റ്റ് എല്ലാം തുറക്കണം എന്നുള്ള രീതിയിലാണ് പ്ലാൻസ് എന്ന് കേൾക്കുന്നു. ഞാന് ഇന്നലെ മിഞ്ഞാന്ന് ഞാൻ ട്രിവാൻഡ്രത്തായിരുന്നു. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഞാൻ ഇന്നലെ മിഞ്ഞാന്നൊന്ന് ക്ലാസ് എടുക്കാൻ പറ്റാത്തത്. അതെ, ഞാനതാ പറഞ്ഞ അശ്വിന്, നവംബറിലേക്കാണ് ഗവൺമെന്റ്. ഒക്ടോബറിൽ ഫൈനൽ ഇയേഴ്സിന്, നവംബറിലേക്ക് ഹോൾ കോളേജസ്, സ്കൂൾസ് 9th 10th 11th 12th അങ്ങനെ എന്തോ ആണ് ഗവൺമെന്റിന്റെ പ്ലാൻ എന്ന് തിരുവനന്തപുരത്ത് അങ്ങനെ ഒരു കേൾവിയുണ്ട്. അറിയില്ല, അതൊക്കെ സിനാരിയോ അനുസരിച്ചിരിക്കും. ഒന്നും പറയാൻ പറ്റാത്ത കാര്യം. Okay, then we'll move on to the next part, that is insect integument. That is, what is integument? What is an just a minute. What is an integument? Covering, yes, a protective covering of the body, just like skin. Our body has a skin, just like that. But insect integument is a bit particular. Just a minute. Sorry. So the insect body wall or that covering or the integument is highly particular, highly peculiar in nature. So we will study a bit of the integument. We are moving deeper and deeper into the morphology part. So And that integument, I will share the PPT. We'll discuss about the integument in detail. Hope it's visible now. So, as I discussed with several times, animals as the skeleton is internal, that's why it is called as endoskeleton. Insects doesn't have an internal skeleton, no endoskeleton, but the outer body wall is hardened, or we call it as a term called sclerotized. Scarred and sclerotization will come up in 5 minutes. The outer body wall is hardened to form an exoskeleton, an external skeleton. So the body wall of the insect or the integument, which is extremely hardened and thickened, is the exoskeleton. So the hardened, thickened body wall or integument of the insect is serves as the exoskeleton or the skeleton of the insect. So here you can see it over here, the rhinoceros beetle body, which is having an extremely hardened integument. All the things, at least those who are residing in Kerala might have handled this or at least seen this insect. And what are the functions of the insect body wall or insect integument? It completely covers the body or along with its appendages, that means wings, legs, antenna, all the appendages. Appendages means that is protruding outside the body. Antenna protruding from the head, legs and wings protruding from the thoracic region. So all those things are called as appendages. So those appendages which are also covered with this integument or body wall. So the integument completely covers the body and appendages, and it gives shape and rigidity to the insect body. It gives strength to the body that we have discussed. It gives strength. Just imagine. Sometimes some of our bones may get broken. If some breakage happens to any part of the body, say an arm and all, whether that shape will be the same, the skeletals, yes or no? Which is a system that provides the shape to our body? Skeletal system, yes. So the skeletal system is the insect integument, which is or the exoskeleton. So the shape of the insect which we see is because of the integument of the exoskeleton. And as all the muscles are attached to this exoskeleton or the integument. So the exoskeleton provides space for attachment of the muscles. I told you about sulcus or sulci. I told you it is just an imagination to provide strength to the insect body wall or the integument. And this imagination, to these imaginations, these muscles will get attached. Sulci and sulci and just like our muscles are attached to our skeletal system, insect muscles are also attached to its skeletal system, but it is an exoskeleton. And this integument or the exoskeleton provides the space for sense organs. The sense organs. Just imagine that our skin is having so many sense organs. That's why we feel the sense of touch, heat, cold, etc. Similar to that, insect integument also provides space for several receptors, chemoreceptors, touch receptors, auditory organs. The auditory organs, hearing organs are present in the insect body wall or the insect integument. And I told you insect integument has a waxy coating, and that waxy coating protects the insect from the evaporation of moisture from its body. So that particular feature of the integument helps it protects from helps to protect the insect from desiccation. Another feature is whatever color, beautiful colors which we see in insect is provided by the integument. So the functions of the body wall, it surrounds the body, it protects the body, it gives rigidity to the body, it gives shape to the body. Just a minute. ഞാൻ ക്ലാസ്സിലാ ടീച്ചറെ, അതാണ്. ഞാനിപ്പോ പറയാം, വിളിക്കാം. Just a minute, just a minute. ഹലോ, ഗുഡ് ആഫ്റ്റർനൂൺ. ഞാൻ ഐ എം ഇൻ എ ക്ലാസ്സിലായിരുന്നു. അത് പാർവതി ടീച്ചർ വിളിച്ചു. പോരെ പോരെ. പോരെ. You can come, you can come. I am in a class, middle of a class. We can quickly come. Okay, come. It gives shape and rigidity to the insect body. It provides attachment to the muscles. Sensory organs are there in the insect integument. Nerve receptors are there in the insect integument. The wax layer of the integument protects the insect from desiccation, and it provides color to insect. I will just show you a picture. See the beautiful coloration of this beetle. This beautiful coloration is provided by the insect integument. It can be chemical coloration there, just for your information. It can be chemical coloration or physical coloration. Chemical coloration means there are certain chemicals which will be giving certain kind of colors, say homochromes, which will give black color, then pyridines which give white or yellow color. So there are certain chemicals, and if you see this insect integument, you can see very fine furrows, striations on it, and very fine, say, a small pinprick like of things. All this gives some physical coloration because the light will reflect, just it will act as a diffraction grating. So it will reflect in different manner, just like a hologram. So similar to that, that's why certain insects, this dragonfly and all, if you see it from one side, it will have one color. It will from another side, it will have another color. That is because of this kind of physical chain structure of the integument. That is just for your information. And let's go into the structure of the integument. The insect integument or the body wall consists of 3 layers. And these layers are the outermost layer, which we see, which we touch, is the cuticle layer. Cuticle. Below the cuticle, we have a cellular layer that is epidermis. Sometimes we call it as hypodermis. This cuticle is non-cellular or acellular. That means cuticle does not have any cells. Below the cuticle, we have a cellular layer that is called as the epidermis or hypodermis. And below this epidermis or hypodermis, we have a basement membrane. Basement membrane doesn't have much function. Actually, this basement membrane provides a space for this epidermis to lie on. So it's just a base, just like a base provided for the epidermis. So first it will be basement membrane. Above it will be the cellular epidermal or hypodermal layer. and above is the outermost layer will be the cuticle. Remember, from now onwards, the number of terminologies will start increasing. At any point of time, you find difficulty in understanding this terminology, just give a message in the chat box. I will repeat. Okay, don't worry. So this is how the basically the insect integument is divided. Three layers: outermost cuticle, below the cuticle we have the cellular epidermis or hypodermis, and below the hypodermis or epidermis we have the basement membrane. This is how it looks like. Don't get confused with this picture. We will go into in detail. First I will show the all three layers. This black color, the lowermost lining black color, that is the basement membrane. And what you see is the cells over here. This is the epidermis or hypodermis. All the things which is above the epidermis, this entire area is forms the cuticle. So from here to here, just a minute. This constitutes the cuticle. This constitutes the epidermis or hypodermis, and this small area, this constitutes the basement membrane. So cuticle, epidermis, and basement membrane. Okay, this is the basic classification. Now we are going into further. This first we will take cuticle. Cuticle is actually produced by epidermis. Cuticle is non-cellular, and whatever part things we have in the cuticle is secreted by epidermis. And this cuticle is divided into two, basically into two: epicuticle and procuticle. Cuticle is basically divided into two: epicuticle and procuticle. This procuticle is further divided into exocuticle and endocuticle. So if you ask what are the different parts of a cuticle, you can say that cuticle is divided into the outermost epicuticle and the inner procuticle. The procuticle is further divided into exocuticle and endocuticle. I will show the picture again. See this. See this. This is the entire thing is the cuticle. Whatever you see it from here to here, that is procuticle. And this topmost black line, what you see, this is the epicuticle. This is the epicuticle. So cuticle is further divided into epicuticle, and this entire thing, that is a procuticle. This procuticle is further divided into exocuticle. This much is exocuticle and this much is endocuticle. Clear? Yes. Okay. Then again, I am going into deep. This epicuticle is further divided. I am repeating it again. Insect body wall consists of cuticle, epidermis or hypodermis, and basement membrane. Cuticle is divided into epicuticle and procuticle. Procuticle is further divided into outer exocuticle and inner endocuticle. Now we are discussing about different layers of the epicuticle. Epicuticle is again further divided. Epicuticle consists of the outermost layer of the epicuticle is called as the cement layer. If you are asked which is the outermost layer of insect integument, you can answer. If the option consists of cement layer, you have to pick that. If there is cuticle and cement layer, again you have to pick cement layer, because theoretically cement layer is the outermost layer of insect integument. So it is a part of the epicuticle, but it is the outermost layer, and below the cement layer we have the wax layer. Below the cement layer we have the wax layer. I told you the purpose of wax layer. It protects the insect from desiccation, prevents loss of water from the insect body. And below the wax layer we have outer epicuticle or cuticulin layer and an inner epicuticle. I'm repeating, epicuticle consists of cement layer, which is the outermost layer. Below cement layer we have a wax layer. Below the wax layer we have a outer epicuticle or cuticulin layer, and the innermost layer of epicuticle is the inner epicuticle. Okay. This is the structure. We can see it over here. Just a minute. See, this black line over here is the basement membrane. This is the cellular epidermis. One thing you remember about epidermis is it is single cell thick. That means only a single layer of cells is there. And above that, whatever you see it over here is the cuticle. This cuticle is divided into this topmost, that is the epicuticle, and all this constitute the procuticle. This procuticle is divided into exocuticle and endocuticle. If we see the division of epicuticle, here comes the division of epicuticle. Epicuticle has the outermost layer, that is the cement layer. Below that we have the wax layer. Below the wax layer we have the outer epicuticle or cuticle layer, what you see it over here, and then we have the inner epicuticle. So if we see it from the top, cement layer, wax layer, outer epicuticle, inner epicuticle, exocuticle, then comes endocuticle, then comes epidermis, and at last basement membrane. Are you clear to this, or do you need any repetition? Okay, I feel that you got the message. I'm moving ahead. If someone is falling behind, just inform. If you don't tell, I can't get it. If it's a physical class, by seeing your face, we get the feeling whether you are understanding or not. But now you have to respond, otherwise we may not be able to understand the things. We will move as if you understood the things. Okay, this is again the same thing. And we discussed just now about epicuticle. Now we discuss about procuticle. Actually, procuticle is between the epicuticle and the epidermis. And this procuticle is divided into exocuticle and endocuticle. Exocuticle, as the name indicates, it is outside. Endocuticle is inside. Procuticle is divided into outer exocuticle and inner endocuticle. And this procuticle mainly consists of a chemical called as chitin. The major component of procuticle is called as chitin. So we usually say that the insect body wall is made up of a chitinous exoskeleton. That is the case of almost all the arthropods. The body wall is made up of chitin, and we call it as chitinous exoskeleton because you see 20 to 50%, almost half of the exoskeleton. Exoskeleton is nothing but that integument. Integument is occupied by this chemical called as chitin. So that's why we call it as the exoskeleton is chitinous in nature, because almost up to 50% is occupied by this chitin. And as I told you, all the layers above the epidermis is secreted by the epidermis, and this procuticle, once it is secreted first by the epidermis, it is not differentiated into exocuticle and endocuticle. Initially, when the procuticle is formed, it is not differentiated into exocuticle and endocuticle. But later on, by a process called as sclerotization, the body wall gets hardened. I repeat, but just after the formation of the procuticle, it is not differentiated into exocuticle and endocuticle. But later on, by a process called sclerotization, the exocuticle becomes hardened and extremely rigid. That's why in almost all the pictures which I have shown you, see this. This is the exocuticle and this is the endocuticle. See this exocuticle. It is extremely darker and they have given a dark shade into it. That is because the sclerotization makes the procuticle darker and harder, more rigid in nature. And that process by which the procuticle gets differentiated into exocuticle and endocuticle is called as sclerotization. And by the end of the sclerotization, the exocuticle gets hardened and darker in color. Okay. Yes. And the lower part of the procuticle, which is, it also undergoes a bit of sclerotization, but not as sclerotized as hardened as exocuticle. That part is called as, that's the less sclerotized part of the procuticle, we call it as the endocuticle. So procuticle, once it is secreted by the epidermis, it is undifferentiated, but by the process of sclerotization, which happens most in the outer part, the outer part gets hardened and rigid, becomes the exocuticle, and the lower part, which is the or the inner part, which is less sclerotized, we call the endocuticle. And we have discussed a chemical called as chitin. Chitin is a nitrogenous polysaccharide. Polysaccharides, you know. Can you give the name, any name of any polysaccharide? Starch. Okay, consists of sugar molecules. So this is also a polysaccharide glycogen. Several are there. So this cellulose, etc. Yes, good. So this polysaccharide consists of nitrogen. Chitin is a polysaccharide. That means it consists of a sugar moiety, and that sugar moiety is nitrogenous. So chitin is a nitrogenous polysaccharide. It is insoluble in water and solvent, that gives its rigidity to the insect integument. Otherwise, if you dip the insect in water, the body will get dissolved in the water. So that's why this the insolubility of chitin gives the rigidity of the insect body wall. And the monomer, here, so a polysaccharide is made up of monosaccharides. So the monomer of chitin is two monomers are there, N-acetyl glucosamine and glucosamine. So chitin is a polymer made up of monomers N-acetyl glucosamine and glucosamine. This amine is the one which is nitrogenous, N-acetyl glucosamine and glucosamine. This chitin gets, another feature of the chitin is it has the ability to get linked with proteins. And one protein to which the chitin binds is called as a protein called as sclerotin. If it links with the protein sclerotin, then that part gets sclerotized. So we can say that during the sclerotization, chitin will get linked with the protein sclerotin, and the insect body wall gets hardened or rigid. But I told you, between two segments, the body needs to be flexible. In the neck region, body needs to be flexible. If the integument gets hardened at that position, it won't be flexible. It will be just like in Misha Madhavan film, Cochin Hanifa was carrying a neck collar. So, oh, it will be extremely rigid. So that flexibility, in the areas of flexibility, instead of sclerotin, chitin will get linked with another protein called as resilin. Resilin. I am repeating the whole thing again. Chitin is a nitrogenous polysaccharide made up of N-acetylglucosamine and glucosamine. In this, chitin can get linked to protein. One protein to which it binds is sclerotin, so that the cuticle gets sclerotized or hardened. Another protein is resilin, where if it gets linked to resilin, that areas become more flexible in nature. That is with respect to chitin. So we have discussed about the cuticle. I'm repeating the cuticle part again. Cuticle is basically divided into, I'll just give a small description of it. Just a minute. So cuticle consists of, this is the basement membrane. Above that we have the cellular epidermis. Then we have the procuticle. Above that we have the, don't think that I am drawing the epicuticle, it's slightly thicker in order to differentiate into different layers. Otherwise, epicuticle is very thin layer. So for your understanding only, I am drawing the epicuticle slightly bigger, and this procuticle will get differentiated into exocuticle and endocuticle. The shaded area is the exocuticle. Outer area which is shaded is the exocuticle. And this inner area of the procuticle is the endocuticle. This is the exocuticle, this is the endocuticle. And this epicuticle outer layer, this is the cement layer. Then comes the wax layer. Then comes the outer epicuticle or cuticle layer. And here comes the inner epicuticle. Are you clear? I haven't labeled. Do you need a labeling? Okay, fine. So this epidermis, I told you, this is one cell thick. Only single layer will be there. There won't be two layers. And this is the cells which secrete all this cuticle. Whatever things we have, it is secreted by the cuticle. And this is the outermost cell layer of insect. Body wall is the outermost part. And in the body wall, we have only one cellular part, that is epidermis. So because of that, we usually say that epidermis is the outermost layer of cellular layer of insects. And it has also have another function. In insects, we have a process called as molting, shedding of the old cuticles. Have you ever seen snakes shedding its old skin? പാമ്പ് പടം പൊഴിക്കുന്നത്. Yes. Similar to that, insects also has the ability to shed all old skin. I told you the insect body wall is extremely rigid, hardened. So if the insect has to grow, this outer body wall has to be removed. Otherwise, it will be remaining. I don't know whether you have seen certain old Hollywood movies, not old Gladiator and all. whether uh, similar one thing I will do is there are certain in naptol and all you might have seen certain kind of belt which we put it around the abdomen to reduce the tummy and all. You might have seen that kind of stuff. So if that is put, it won't show outside, but it will if you feed again, take food, more food, it will grow. But if that kind of a structure is there on the insect body which gives rigidity, it won't be able to grow. So it has to be shed periodically. During once it is shed, it gets a few time so as to expand. That process is called as molting. And for that molting, it needs certain enzymes. We will discuss about molting in 5 minutes. And that enzymes are also secreted by epidermis. Just imagine that enzymes needed for molting is also secreted by epidermis. Basal membrane, it's just a basal layer. Okay, it's a thin cellular layer. Nothing much about basal. And on the cuticle, we have several cuticular appendages. You might have seen hairs on the insect cuticle, isn't it? Certain pictures I have shown. In certain insects, you might have seen the body will have spines. So these kind are called as integumentary processes or cuticular appendages, processes arising from the insect body wall or cuticle. These processes can be internal or external. That means if this is the integument, certain processes can be growing outside externally. That means we can see certain processes will be inside, moving inside. We'll have a short discussion about the external and internal cuticular processes. This external process is also divided into two. Certain processes arise from the epidermis. So that means that processes are cellular in nature. That means they consist of a cell. So certain cuticular appendages are cellular in nature. That means it is connected to epidermis. Whereas certain appendages are non-cellular. That means it doesn't consist of any, does not have any involvement of epidermis. It is formed only by the procuticle and epicuticle. There won't be any cellular part in it. So that kind of appendages are called as non-cellular. And among the cellular one, it can be unicellular or multicellular. That means a single cell can develop into an appendage, or sometimes a number of cells form an appendage. Imagine, I'll give an example. Take a hair growing out of the insect integument, insect body wall. This hair can grow out of the epidermis. From the cell of the epidermis can grow out into hair. That is cellular appendage. But if this hair grows out of procuticle and epicuticle without the involvement of epidermis, it is called as non-cellular. Okay. And in the case of cellular appendage, cellular hairs, imagine the cellular hairs, it is formed from the epidermis. If only a single cell leads to the formation of the hair, we call it as unicellular appendage. If number of cells leads to the formation of that hair, we call it as multicellular appendage. If a single cell forms into an appendage, we call it as unicellular appendage. If number of cells leads to the formation of appendage, we call it as multicellular appendage. And coming to the non-cellular appendage, it does not involve any, if that hair is growing out without any involvement of epidermis, it is usually immovable, because only if the presence of cells only that means if a hair is growing out of procuticle and epicuticle, it is immovable. It is not articulated. We call it as non-articulated. It is immovable. And this rigid, immovable, it is rigid. It is not moving. That's why we call it as rigid, immovable, non-cellular processing. The examples are spines, microtrachea, tubercles, etc. Microtrachea means hair-like structures, but it doesn't have any involvement of cell. It is immovable, non-articulated. I will give an example. Say this finger. I'll say that the finger is articulated at this position to this palm. So this point is called as articulation. If it is not articulated, if you're fixing something, if the doctor takes up some surgery and fixes over it, it's immovable. It is non-articulated. So it needs a cell to have an articulation. So non-cellular processes are all rigid, non-articulated, immovable structures. Examples are fine hair like microtrachea. Spines are there. Certain spines are non-cellular and non-articulated. Then there is a structure called as tubercles. I'll show a few pictures, then you will be able to understand. And this cellular processes can be movable or immovable, articulated or non-articulated. This movable articulated process, which is unicellular, is called as macrotrachea or setae. Setae is nothing but hairs. Don't confuse with this term. Setae, in layman term, we can call it as hairs on the insect body. And these setae or macrotrachea are movable or cellular in nature, but it is unicellular in nature. That means a single cell gives rise to macrotrachea and it is movable or articulate. I will give a picture and then I will example the second point. And sometimes several, I told you, this epidermis, sometimes a single cell grows out into an appendage. That single cell growing out of appendage, I call as example as macrotrachea or setae. Sometimes number of cells grows out into a appendage. That means multicellular. These multicellular appendages are called as spur. S-P-U-R, spur. Cuticular appendages, integumentary appendages, I will give examples. It can be divided into cellular or non-cellular. Non-cellular ones are non-articulated, immovable, rigid processes, and their examples are microtrachea and spines. The cellular ones are mostly movable because of the presence of the cell. It can move. No, it is articulated. It is movable. These movable ones are cellular ones, and the cellular ones can be unicellular or multicellular. Unicellular example is macrotrachea or setae. Setae is the plural, seta is the singular, S-E-T-S, seta is the singular. The multicellular ones, movable ones, are called as the spur. And in insects, we try to identify the insects based on the arrangement of these hairs, setae. So if we study the arrangement of setae in an insect, that study is called as ketotaxy. The study of insects based on these hairs, we call it as ketotaxy. Entomologically, we should call it as setae, not hairs. Okay, I will show the pictures. Then I will ask again. See this. See, this is the spine. The cuticle is just growing out into a rigid non-cellular process. It is immovable. This is a spine. But take the case of macrotrichia or setae. See the cell, the epidermal cell. The epidermal cell grows out into a seta or a hair. This is a unicellular. I told you macrotrichia or seta is unicellular. A single cell grows out into a hair or seta. And the cell, just a minute. You can see a single cell which is growing out into the macrotrichia or seta or hair. That single cell that forms the setae is called as trichogen cell. You can see it over here, trichogen cell. The single cell which grows out into the setae is called as the trichogen cell. And there is a cell which surrounds this trichogen cell. You can see this gray colored cell which is adjacent to the trichogen cell. That is called as the tormogen cell or the socket forming cell. I will give an example. See, this is a setae. This is formed from a cell. This is the epidermal cell. And around the epidermis, there will be another cell which forms a socket around the trichogen cell. And this socket helps in the movement of the setae. And the socket forming cell, we call it as the tormogen cell. Tormogen cell. Are you clear up to this? These are the external process. Cuticular appendages or processes, we call it as we have external or internal process. We have the external process. External process, it is divided into cellular and non-cellular one. The non-cellular one, it is non-articulated, it is immovable, we cannot move it. Example is spines or microtrichia and tubercles, etc. Then we have cellular ones. Cellular ones are mostly articulated or movable. Cellular ones are divided into unicellular and multicellular. Unicellular ones is macrotrichia or seta. Multicellular ones are spur, examples of spurs. This macrotrichia is formed from a cell of the epidermis called as the trichogen cell, and the cell surrounding the trichogen cell we call it as the tormogen cell. This is the external appendage of insect. The internal process, internal appendage, those that grow towards the insect body, it is mainly for, I told you, it is mainly for attachment of muscles. We have two kind of internal processes. One is apodeme and the another one is apophysis. Apodemes are follow invagination. That means if this is the integument and if the integument invaginates like this, and here we have the muscle attachment, here we can have this muscle attachment. If this inner part is followed just like this, it is called as apodeme. If it is solid, that means it is joined together and it is very strong and solid internal process, then it is called as the apophysis. I will draw a picture and then you will be able to understand. See, this is the body, this is the invagination of the cuticle. This invagination here, it's hollow. It is apodeme. Again, I am drawing an internal process, and if this is solid, it is completely solid, then it is called as apophysis. I am finishing it, molting I will take in the next class. Are you able to follow this? So many terminology we have discussed today. Vishnu, how you are sharing this?